So good evening, everyone. Hope you're well. We were just giving people a few more minutes to join. My name is Melanie Hapisu. I will be your trainer for the next couple of minutes. For those who have not met me before, I am a digital marketing consultant, but I also run my own agency here in Nairobi, Kenya called DigiPath Africa, where we help businesses to make the best out of their digital marketing, either through training, strategies, creating content on their behalfs, as well as auditing some of the efforts they've been making. So if you just joined in, we're introducing ourselves in the chat. Maybe you can let us know your name and what you do. You never know, your next client could be here on this call. So today's session is all about brainstorming ideas for your social media marketing in the shortest time. So I know that very many people struggle with creating content, especially when you're the owner of the business as well, because then you need to set aside time to actually create that content. But sometimes you can quickly create your content or come up with ideas basically in a quick way to enable you to find the whole process of creating content a lot easier. So for today's session, that's what we're going to be talking about. And I'm going to talk about it both from ideation perspective as well as an implementation perspective. Implementation in terms of whether you're going to implement it as a visual, as a, if it's a still image, if it's a video, regardless of how you're going to implement it, we'll talk briefly as well about that. So in case you have any questions, feel free to ask them in the chat. Then at some point, we will have a Q&A session where we'll get to address all the questions that people may have. In case it's really, really urgent and cannot wait until the Q&A session, feel free to just either raise your hand or unmute yourself, and I'll be able to address it at that point in time. So first, I'd like to just give you maybe we can start from the perspective of just talking about this whole thing that we're calling creating content. What exactly do you need to keep in mind, even as you think of what type of content you're creating? So usually for me, I like to think of them as the 5 W's and the H. That's what I call them. So these are the 5 W's and H of content creation. So you need to be able to understand who exactly is your target audience. You need to understand what type of content appeals to them. You also need to understand where can you find them online, when are they online, why should they listen to you, and how exactly will you communicate your message to them. So why are all those things important? Because in one way or another, they could impact how your content performs, regardless of where you're implementing it, whether it's on social media, whether it's on email, regardless of where you're going to implement it. If you don't understand some of these aspects, then you could end up not getting the best value out of the content you'll have put out. So for example, if you do not understand your target audience, you'll end up creating the wrong kind of content for them. And we'll get to talk about some of the ideas that can be based around your target audience just in a few minutes. But you can, if you also don't understand what type of content appeals to your customer, then you'll end up talking a lot when it comes to the content you're creating, but not delivering your message effectively. What exactly do I mean by that? For instance, let's say you are targeting, let's say Gen Zs. Most Gen Zs like you to get either straight to the point with your communication, don't like reading things that are too long. So if you end up doing articles, for example, as a way to pass your message, they may not be as effective as 1-minute videos, for example, or 30-second videos. So you need to figure out what type of content appeals to them. You also need to understand where you can find them online, simply because depending on the platform you're implementing your content on, the content you may come up with may be different. So for instance, right now for a platform like Instagram, the algorithm is prioritizing Reels. So if you want to reach as many people as possible in a quick way on Instagram right now, the solution would then be Reels. If you go ahead and decide, okay, I'm going to use Instagram, but I'm going to do more of, let's say, IGTV videos, which could be more longer, then you may not end up reaping as many benefits as people who are implementing Reels would actually reap. So that's why it's important to understand where you can find them online in terms of the different platforms. If you're implementing something on email, you have to remind yourself that an email is not an article. So in as much as you're trying to communicate a lot, it can't again be too long to make someone feel like they're reading a whole article that should have been on your website in the first place. In addition to that, when we talk about why should people listen to you based on your content, that's a very important aspect to understand, simply because very many brands are talking online. But the main question is, what is actually going to make your brand unique? What is going to make someone stop scrolling to pay attention to what you're saying? So different people have different ways of coming up with, the ideas. But for me, I like to save time personally, simply because then sometimes you don't have that time aspect in plenty. And that's why I came up with this specific training, because I wanted to teach you how you can create your content in the shortest way possible. So for today, we are going to go through it in 4 aspects, and I'll just open a blank document that I can share so that we can sort of just have a discussion as I type it there. And why these 4 elements? Simply because that's what I personally used, and I've discovered it enables me to come up with content for even some of my clients in terms of just ideation, even in 15-20 minutes. And then I can have enough time to, if it's creating designs, for example, if it's maybe organizing how videos will be shot. I have the privilege of working with clients who only shoot videos that are less than a minute. So everything can be done, say in an hour, a whole month of content, because of working quickly. So I want you guys to keep that at the back of your mind, that sometimes creating content is just, it doesn't have to be the most difficult thing. And sometimes it's only difficult simply because you're working alone. I think for those of you who've attended my sessions before, most of the time I tell people, you don't have to work alone. And if you don't have a team, it's as easy as asking a few people that you know. I'm not saying that you hire a whole team. All I'm trying to say is you could ask your friends or your workmates, what do you think of these ideas? What do you think I should change? What will you feel, or what will this post make you do if you saw it on a social media platform, for example? So the 4 methods we are going to use, the first one is around, you basically ask yourself, what kind of information do you think your target audience would want to know from your brand? So that's one way of coming up with ideas in a very simple way. And we'll actually do an example for that, just for that to sink in. But that's a very good question to ask yourself, because at the end of the day, people will visit your social media page or your website or whatever for different reasons. And if you think about it, even from a website perspective, your website needs to be informational, because people are coming there to get information that will answer some of the questions they have about your brand. That's what we're basically saying by this first question. So the content you create around the information your target audience needs to know is around some of the questions that they may have about your business. Another method we will use is, you need to ask yourself, based on the services that you provide as a business, what kind of content ideas do you think you can generate based on that? Again, I'll give you an example when it comes to that. Another way that we can probably think about when it comes to creating our content is, you could choose to divide your content into some of the overall goals we have when it comes to digital marketing. So you could decide, I'll think of ideas that will help me generate awareness. I could think of ideas that will help me generate interest or desire or action. Then you sort of think of what exactly can you push in terms of information that will help you achieve each of those goals. Then finally, you can categorize it based on pillars. Most of these pillars are to do with ease. So I like to call them the 4 E's. So what kind of content can you create that will either entertain, educate, excite, or engage? So I know I've talked about a lot of methods. Don't worry, we're going to dive into each one of them for the next few minutes. Again, we're going to make it as simple as possible, just so that you can practice some of these methods and enjoy being able to come up with content in a quick way, whether it's for your social media, whether it's for your website, maybe you're coming up with a blog, whether it's for email marketing, maybe you want to send out an email. These methods will apply either way. So I'll challenge you guys to engage me for the next few minutes. Feel free to unmute yourself if you'd like to contribute and say anything around the conversation. During my trainings, there are no wrong answers, so don't worry, just share your thoughts and we'll build on that thought as we keep, getting to know more about this whole process of content creation. So I'll share my screen for demo purposes. So our first method, or rather our first question, is what kind of information do you think your target audience would want to know from you as a brand? So for purposes of these examples, I want us to imagine we are a bank. Let's say we are Bank X. So if we are Bank X, I want you to think of these questions from a perspective of a bank. And I'll be asking the questions, then I'll give us maybe a minute or two to just think around what are some of the responses you'd give should this question have been asked to you. And feel free to say the simplest of things. You don't have to overthink it. This process only works if you sort of write down or talk about the first ideas that come to your mind. That's why we're talking about the shortest way of creating content. So if you are Bank X, what kind of information do you think your target audience would want to know about your business? And I think I can start us off before I open the floor to anyone else who would like to contribute. So if I was a customer for Bank X, one of the things I'd want to know is branch information. So where are their branches? What time do the branches open and close, and so on and so forth. So what else do you think someone would want to know if we were talking about this Bank X? Anyone? Feel free to just unmute yourself.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi, yeah. So, on my side, I would want to know like what type of accounts do they have?
Nice. Thank you for that, Erica. Mana Cristo, I think you wanted to say something.
Yes, I did. One of the things I wanted to know when I opened a bank account was if the bank still had backward thinking. Because 10 years ago, when I wanted to open a savings account, I had to have my husband's permission and his signature to open it. It's always stuck with me. So when I went to NCBA, that's where I am now. There have that, so I didn't even go anywhere else.
Thank you for that. I'm a bit surprised. Shame. It would be so sad if banks were still backward thinking.
Yeah.
Anyone else?
Yeah.
I would want to know what sort of credit facilities they have, what are the interest rates, repayment period, things like that.
Nice. Thanks for that, Michelle. Anyone else?
Terms of opening an account with them and the charges, if there are any.
Thank you for that, Ezra. Anyone else? Nice. I think we can build on that. So already you can see, one, Having more than one person sort of help you come up with some of these ideas helps. That's why I'm really encouraging you to sort of, do your brainstorming with other people. Sometimes you may feel like the circle of people you know may not really be helpful during the brainstorm. That's okay. Feel free to outsource. I personally know people, including myself, who just help businesses to brainstorm. Like, that's it. A client would approach me and just tell me, I want to sit down with you for an hour. I'd like us to brainstorm on ideas for content for a month with me. So it's possible for you to, outsource and, sort of negotiate whatever is affordable for you to get ideas from someone. Of course, there'll be limits. You can imagine, especially if someone is giving you ideas maybe for a whole campaign, there are limits which you can discuss further with other people. But already, just from answering these simple questions, we've gotten ideas of some of the, let me call them pillars for our content. And when you think of how we would implement some of these things, depending on who is implementing, some of these things could be different. So for example, if it's types of accounts, someone may decide, let me just have a post, a still image that will list, we have current account, savings account, just a list of a few accounts we have. Someone else could decide to have a video, a short video where someone from the bank is actually talking about the different types of accounts they have. Someone else could decide to do an article and drive people to read more about that article. So we're all different depending on how things are being implemented, depending on what audience you're creating that content for. So you can imagine already, let's say if you were a brand that was posting content once a week on your social media, for example, you already have 5 posts just out of this. So for your whole month, if it's once a week, 4 weeks, you have content for the whole month. So it's now up to you to finish your, 2-3 minute brainstorm. We've taken around 2-3 minutes, and for you to decide how you're going to execute it. Is it going to be, one is going to be an article, maybe another one is going to be a video, maybe another one is going to be a still post. So you can already see that has shortened some of the duration of time you're going to take. If you decided to just wake up and say, okay, what will we post today? Okay, what's trending today? So if you plan for it early, it becomes a lot easier to shorten that duration you take when it comes to creating your content. This is one way. I want us to go to the second method, just so that you can see the difference between the two. So this second method, again, think of it in terms of the bank again. So what kind of content can you create based on the services the bank provides? I'll give you an example of this, and I want to start from an example from a digital marketing perspective, then I'll now come to my bank example. So today for my business, one of the services we provide is we can do a social media audit for your business. If I was to think of what content we can create or what topics we can have for content around auditing someone's social media platforms, I could highlight things like what exactly is a social media audit and why is it important. I could highlight things like how often should you do a social media audit. Maybe I can talk about quick ways to audit your own business. Something like that, quick methods to audit your own business. I could decide to talk about some of the things to look out for when doing a social media audit for your business. So already from just one theme, from one of the services I offer, which is auditing, I've been able to come with almost 4 or 5 ideas for different posts I can have or different themes I can have for the topics I would be discussing. So if I think about it from this bank perspective, let's say one of the services that my bank offers is they can allow me to open a savings account, for example. So I'll come here and say savings account. Some of the content I can create around this is maybe why is it important to save? I can maybe come up with something like how can one start saving, of course, with Bank X. I can talk about, let's say, something like what amount should I save, or maybe how can I determine how much to save? Yeah, so maybe something like how can I determine how much to be saving? So it's up to you to decide, will you have this as separate posts? So that's 3, or will you decide to have maybe an FAQ around savings, for example? It's for you to decide how you'll execute that. But you can imagine this is just 3 posts or 3 articles or 3 videos from one topic. From one topic, which is specifically a service. If you decided to go into another service that the bank offers, maybe let's say, for example, loans, maybe unsecured loans, then you can talk about 3 different other things around your unsecured loans. That's already 6 posts that you have. So until that point, I don't know if anyone has any question before we go into the examples for this specific question. I'd like us to do just a round where everyone can sort of identify one service that the bank would offer, and then sort of talk us through some of the, let's say, subtopics that they would have under that specific service for the bank. Any questions so far? And this document will be shared after the training on email together with the recording. So for those of you who would like it, you'll have it. Nice. So if there are no questions, I think we can hear from a few people. So I want a few people to just pick one service and sort of talk us through what some of the subtopics they would talk about under that main service. So any volunteers before I pick on anyone, feel free to just let us know. I think we can hear from around 2 or 3 people before we proceed. Anyone?
I can go.
Great.
Yeah, so maybe one thing that I would look for in a bank as a business person is microfinancing for women, you know, and that kind of support. And maybe ideas for posts could be like a short video of how they are female friendly, they are small business friendly, you know, compared to most banks and things like that.
Thanks for that. Anyone else? Or anyone who'd like to add on a subtopic for this specific service of microfinancing for women? If you've gotten any ideas, that is. Don't worry, guys, no wrong answers. So feel free to just tell us what you think. Pick any service for a bank. Maybe would someone like to do unsecured loans? I think that's something I had mentioned. If you would, feel free to just unmute yourself. Or any other service you'd like to pick. Maybe we can hear from a few more people. Yes, Erica?
Yes, so you were asking on unsecured loans.
Yeah.
They, like, how much do they give and what is their interest rates? I actually feel like most banks don't tell you that. You really have to follow up with them actually on the social media. They don't. I was just doing that recently. I don't know if this falls under loans, but I also wanted to know, of course, the different types of accounts and how they operate. Like, for example, in savings, in the current, and so of course there are differences. And this is something that I was just asking last week. So I don't know if that is, I think that can stand on its own. And then unsecured loans, especially knowing the interest rates, that is also something that should stand by itself.
Nice, nice. Thanks for that. Thanks for that. Definitely makes sense. And guys, by the way, if you're sitting there and feeling like, oh, I don't have ideas for this service-based question, that's okay. So you realize for some of the methods I'm going to show you, some of them will be pretty easy for some people, some of them may be difficult. The whole point is for you to sort of identify what works best for you and you sort of run with it. So don't feel like I have ideas for everything, so you have to have ideas for each of the questions. No, please pick what is more convenient for you. In fact, for me, most of the time, especially when I'm working with a business that is coming online for the first time, this first method is my go-to every single time. You know, then maybe if I'm working with a business that has slightly been in the industry for some time, and maybe they've not had a chance to really talk about their services so much, then I'll go to the second method. So it's all about choosing what works best for you. Then we also have another method where you could decide you're going to narrow down your ideas for content based on some overall goals we have. And these overall goals, let me just list them down here. So you could decide maybe out of the content you're creating, one of the goals you'd like to achieve is to generate awareness. Maybe another one, maybe you'd want to generate interest. Maybe the other one is to, you know, increase the number of people who are considering to work or purchase your brand. And then finally action. Now the ones who end up actually paying. So here, you could think of it in terms of, can I say, examples that could relate to you personally. Sometimes you don't have to really overthink it. So if you are trying to create awareness for a business, what are some of the things that you have to keep in your mind that will enable you to figure out that people have actually gotten to know about your brand? What are some of the questions that someone could have when it comes to a new brand? So it could be questions like, maybe, who is brand X? What does the brand do? How do they do it? Why work with them? For example, you could generate more questions. But from an awareness perspective, where you're trying to create awareness for the first time about whatever you're doing, these are some of the questions you get to answer. If it's from a perspective of generating interest, you need to ask yourself, what kind of topics or what kind of information will you create that will generate interest amongst people? So for example, for me, when it comes to, let's say, my own business, allow me to use my own business as an example, some of the things that generate interest when it comes to my business could be things such as maybe posts that are to do with maybe, let's say something like, if you're doing these 5 things when it comes to your online marketing, you know, this is probably why you're not making any sales, for example. That will spark an interest in someone, because if at all they identify even one thing that they're doing that you said they should not do, they'll quickly want to know what the rest are. And if at all you've put a clear call to action, like maybe DM us if you'd like assistance on the same, there are high chances that they'll actually DM you simply because you got them interested enough. I'm not saying that all posts to do with interest must be, you know, things like that, like if you're doing these 5 things or if you're blah, 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 blah. It could depend. Interest could even be in the form of where you decide to, you know, sort of put out a post that is kind of a teaser to introduce people to either visit your website or to visit your company profile. Interest could look like that. So just for purposes of guys remembering, when I share this document, I think I'll write that. So maybe content that will tease people want to visit your website or company profile. Then you could say things like posts to do with maybe if you are doing or if you are not doing, you know, I'm sure you've seen those posts or things you should stop doing. For example, things you should stop doing or things you should start doing. Posts like that most of the time generate an interest when it comes to consumers. So I'll leave those examples for now. If you are trying to get people to consider your brand, some of the things you could do could be around things that will allow them to try your product. So for example, are you going to create content around maybe get a free sample, get a free trial, attend my free training, like what I have now, for example, you know, so things to do with getting something for free before they get the paid version, for example. So getting something for free before the paid version. It could look like an Ask Us Anything session. So where you get to tell people maybe something like, this is the product you're providing, you know, this is sort of how it works and the problem it's solving. Then you can tell people something like, yeah, ask us anything you would like around this specific product or service. So sometimes you answering those questions could lead to people actually considering to purchase your product or service. Then when it comes to action, most of the time you think of discounts or, you know, sales that you're going to have. So what kind of content can you create that is around, you know, either discounts or sales or specific limited offers, for example, around your business? So a good example I can give you, every 30th of June, actually tomorrow is social media day. And I see lots of digital marketers doing giveaways, for example, or having discounts on certain trainings they're having and so on and so forth, simply because they've been talking about it for some time. And this is kind of like the final step to get people to take an action. So most of the time, discounts, sales, offers, you know, are sort of what will get people to take that final step, or things like, you know, limited slots available, you know, so teasing people with, you know, things like that. So maybe 5 slots to go so that people feel the urge to sort of purchase whatever you're trying to push at that moment in time. So until that point, anyone with a question, is that part clear around dividing your content based on your goals? Any clarifications needed? If you're good, please give me a thumbs up if you can. Nice, thank you. Great, thank you so much. So final method that will also allow you to create content in a quick way is by sort of focusing on some of these pillars we have. So there's 4 specific pillars, either content that entertains, content that excites, content that engages, content that educates. So if I'm to think of each of these ideas, depending on the brand you're pushing, some pillars may have ideas, some may not. Or all of them may have ideas, but for some of them, you may not feel as comfortable. So most of the time when you tell people content that entertains, automatically human beings think of memes. But entertaining may not necessarily just be memes. It could be in different forms. For example, you could decide, other than a meme, are you going to maybe do a riddle? Are you going to do, you know, a puzzle? You know, something that is, you know, different. It just doesn't have to be memes. So already you can see I've given you some suggestions. So let's say under this entertaining, maybe let's say we have memes. Memes, maybe riddles, maybe things like common quotes, maybe ask guys to complete them. Maybe we could have puzzles, for example. So depending on what works for your business. So for example, let's say we are in the banking sector, we are Bank X, and we wanted to come up with a puzzle. You could tell people to, you know, comment and say what words they found in the puzzle. You know, so maybe you could decide your puzzle has words like savings, words like loans, you know, things like that for people to identify and sort of comment in the comment section. You could decide to have maybe a quote that is common around money. I don't know any, but I'm just trying to think around. If it's maybe memes, you could decide to, maybe it's end month and you know how people are just going to be paid, and before you know it, the money is over. You could decide to get a meme around that, for example. If it's content that will probably excite people, you need to think of, number one, first is whatever you're doing exciting at all? Is it something that is going to make people feel excited? And usually I say, whether you're a product or a service, to some extent, there could be an element of excitement, especially when you think of the problem you're solving for your consumer. So for example, for me, when I'm working with businesses, most of the time, the people who work with me get excited at the fact that there'll be a lot of convenience when it comes to creating their content, managing their pages, because they no longer have to think about it. So it's up to me to figure out, how can I position that in terms of a social media post so that someone sees that post and actually feels excited? That is, if it's possible. So I could think of, am I going to use a story, a relatable story, to tell someone, have you ever been in a situation where you were creating content and you had just had a mind block and you were not able to think of, any ideas, blah, blah, blah. Then I sort of bring an exciting element or call to action that will make them feel like, wow, I'm so glad that I found, these people, for example. If it's around content that will engage people, engagement could be in different forms. You need to ask yourself, how do you want people to engage? Do you want them to like? Do you want them to comment? Do you want them to share your post? Do you maybe want them to save your post? And so on and so forth. So you could decide, how are you going to communicate this to get people to probably converse with you? So maybe based on a post you have, maybe let's say today we are talking about, why it's important for people to join in the fight to end maybe sexual violence. As an example, you could decide to ask people questions like, what do you think we can do as a society to end this vice of sexual violence? Then you can tell them something like, comment on the post below. That's an example of them engaging with you in the comment section. Maybe you could give tips. Maybe today I could decide, let me give tips around how you can quickly come up with content in a quick way, like I've given you here. Then I could decide to come up with a post and tell people, save this post for later, or share this post with someone who you think will find it of benefit, for example. You could decide to create content that is solely for the purpose of educating. So you just want people to know some information. You're just, passing it on for them so that they are more knowledgeable when it comes to that area. So maybe things like 5 things you should know about creating content, for example. I can have posts like that. So depending on what method works for you, you can already see for some of the methods, we don't have so many ideas as compared to others, but already you can tell, just in the past, we've done almost 40 minutes. We've been able to go through these 4 methods and we've been able to come up with ideas for each of them. So you can only imagine, if we pushed it to an hour, we'd probably have more ideas. Or even if we left it at this 40 minutes, it would be for us to come and now decide, how are we representing this information? If it's a video, maybe on the different types of accounts, do we need to write a script? Maybe for Michelle, how long does Michelle need to record? Does the video maybe need to be 1.5 minutes or 2? She records the video and you're done with the video bit. You could come and decide, maybe when it comes to this conversation of savings accounts, am I going to have an informational post where someone will swipe from one slide to another? Maybe the first slide will be frequently asked questions around savings accounts or around savings. So why is it important to save? How can one start saving? How can I determine how much is to be saved? Then of course you put in a call to action, so something like, ready to open your savings account. Since we're Brand X, maybe visit our website to open your account, or contact us on this. So you can see we've saved ourselves so much time rather than thinking of ideas on the go. So usually I encourage people, think of all your ideas and topics at once, and then later calm down and figure out which ideas are you going to keep or remove based on different elements. Maybe you realize, for this post, maybe you would have preferred for it to be in video format, but you don't have the equipment to shoot video, so that idea has to be benched. Maybe you start thinking of an idea, then you realize, this idea, probably it won't fall in line with the theme we have for the month. Maybe let's crop that off. So it's all up to you to ask yourself questions like that to sieve down and figure out which ideas work and which ones do not work. Until that point, any questions, any comments? What do you think of these methods that I've taken you through? Do you feel like they make your work a lot easier? Maybe we can just do a round of comments from everyone as I wait the questions. Do you think it's made your work easier when you think of content creation, or is content creation still looking like that one difficult task when it comes to your business or your job? Maybe we can hear from Anne, then Erica, then maybe Ezra. Anne, what do you think? Okay, we'll come back to Anne. Erica, what do you think of these methods we've gone through? Do you feel like your life will be a lot easier? Okay, Michelle, can you hear me? If you can, please let us know what you think.
Yeah, Melanie, this sounds much easier. And in fact, as you're talking, I was actually working on my own. Yeah, so I already have ideas to start with.
Nice, nice. I'm glad. Thank you so much. Maybe we can hear from Mana Cristo. Mana Cristo, I know you're in business. What do you think of these methods that we've gone through today? Does it make your work easier if you are the one to come up with the content?
It definitely does, because just like Michelle, I think I was also thinking, I don't do that many videos, you know, and when you talked of the three, the E's, you know, the education, the entertain, and all that, you know, it's like, you know, having categories like that makes it so much simpler without even brainstorming further than that.
Yes.
You know, it seems more tangible, because when you see other people doing these, you know, cool, amazing things or whatever, and you're always like, I can't do that. How did they come up with that? You know? So just thinking of that, I was like, education, interesting, because, you know, it triggers something else, and, you know, and that just starts like a domino effect. Like, oh, I could have done that. I could have done that.
Yeah.
So yeah, it definitely helps.
Nice. I like that comment. I remember when I was still new in career, those are some of the things I used to tell myself, like, oh my God, how did these guys think of this, such a cool idea like this, you know? And sometimes you tell yourself, I mean, it's in you. It's just that you didn't have enough time to, you know, possibly go through as many ideas as possible. So, I mean, thank you so much for that.
Yeah, I think sometimes it's just, all it takes sometimes is somebody guiding, like showing you the path.
Yeah.
You know, and the possibilities that is there within that.
Yeah.
And like, you know, and then you can, like you said, like, oh wow, okay, that wasn't so hard.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
But you wasted how many years in the business not really coming up with a comprehensive way of generating ideas and things like that, you know? So
wow, guys, I hope I've helped a lot of you out there. Maybe we can hear from Erica. I can see you're unmuted.
Yes. So personally, this is so helpful because yeah, just like you said, I also see this post and I'm like, how did they do that? Like, how did they come up with that? And I think the whole idea is to get more intentional and to know what you are advertising when. And I would like to ask a question. If now we come up with this content, does it mean that, for example, in a month you should entertain, educate, or it will depend with what you are pushing in that month? Do we go ahead and make sure that in your month you have all the elements? Or, for example, you can just say this month is entertainment? Like, what can you advise?
Okay, so it depends with what you're pushing, and that's why I gave the example of sexual violence. I've had the honor of working with a client who does that. Most difficult thing I've done in my life. And it was so challenging because then the theme the client had for the month was to sort of talk about the role of governance in ending this cycle of sexual violence when it comes to children. And I remember one of the things I was asking myself is if I thought of maybe using all of those E's, you know, the entertain, educate, excite, for such a theme. I mean, it's very sensitive. I don't think there's any way we would entertain. You know, I don't think there's any way we'd probably excite unless we sort of change the angle totally. So it depends with what you're pushing. And that's why I've given you this different method, so that if you feel like maybe if you're using the 4 E's and you feel like, this is not sufficient content based on my theme, you can borrow from another method and sort of have your pillars, but still have another method that will guide you around more content. I hope that answers you.
Yes, it does. Thank you very much.
Fantastic. Sharon, any final comments from you? And then we can go to Ezra.
Hi.
Hi.
Yes, I found the pillars like a good way to start on. Nothing so heavy, just a practical point by point on how to come up with content.
Nice. I'm so glad. Thank you so much, Sharon. Finally, Ezra, any final comments from you? We have a few more minutes to go. Maybe you can give us your final comments, then I can take any other questions anyone may have. That's if you're able to unmute yourself.
From my own point of view, I think the training has been very important, because as a brand's person and PR, it really requires a lot of things from you. Let's say first, how to communicate to your target audience. And from these 40 minutes, I've really learned a lot. I've been spending a lot of time thinking on what content to use. Of course, I know my target audience, and you see, in my perspective or in my area, we are like competing with other institutions, other organizations. So you have to like all the time be ahead of everyone. Like the entire time you're thinking of new content, and at times it's very hectic, but with this guide, at least you have the why, the when, and that simplifies your work. At least you're able to work ahead of the schedule to know what your next post or the next information you're communicating. I really thank you for that, Melanie.
Nice. Thank you so much for that, Ezra. I'm so glad. And I remember when I was preparing for this class, I literally wanted you guys to feel like that. Like, in as much as the session was short, I wanted you to feel like, okay, we've learned so much in that short session, and things you can actually carry and implement as soon as possible. I think for those of you who've attended more than one training of mine, I like you to take information that you can implement immediately and not just theoretical information. Of course, I'd want you to take my paid trainings, but if at all this 1 hour is sufficient enough for you to get the help you need for free, why not? I mean, the world will not end. I like passing information as much as possible, and I'm so grateful that you were all able to join in today. I think for the next 2 minutes, I'll be happy to just stay on the call, answer any digital marketing related questions you may have before we call it a day. But thank you so much for attending. I will share the recording. I will share the Word document just so that you can have it for reference going forward. So any questions from anyone? In case you just joined in, welcome. We have just finished the session. So I am taking any digital marketing related questions anyone may have, but don't worry, I will share the recording and what we've gone through via email, so you'll be able to catch up on it. But in case anyone has a question, feel free to ask. I am here. Nice. So it looks like there are no questions. Once again, nice to meet you all. Thank you so much for joining in. Looking forward to engage with you further. You'll be seeing my email possibly in the next 1 or 2 hours once the recording is ready. Feel free to keep in touch. For those of you who have attended my trainings for the 100th session, thank you so much. I don't take it for granted to see your faces here. It makes me feel a lot more comfortable. So I'm really, really grateful for that. So you guys have a lovely evening, or day, depending on where you are. Thank you so much for coming. Keep safe.